Have you ever had to win a mother's love? Those who've not been through this can't understand that it really happens and that it's terribly difficult, disgusting, and generally seems unthinkable at first. But this was my case. So I'll tell you everything in order and draw your own conclusions. Hi, everyone. My name is Justin, and I've had a lot of bad things happen in my life. And I've always been curious about why some people have everything and others have nothing. As I said, I had to prove to my own mother that I was capable of something more, and all the sake for her love. You've got it all right. My mother didn't want to give birth to me. She and her father dated for a while, and she got pregnant. Dad was happy. He wanted them to have a family. He was ready to become a father. But after the birth of mother, less than a year later, he left. According to my mother, it was insanely difficult for her. She was very worried that she was left alone with a child in her arms. She was without a job, her own home, and no relatives or friends nearby. She became very depressed and took out all of her anger on me. My mother couldn't even think that was causing harm. She thought that since I was little, I'd forget everything. But I did not forget, and I remembered everything to the smallest detail. When I was 4 years old, my mother and I stayed at home. She had already taken a job not far from home, working as a cleaner in a store. She came home tired, put her wallet on the table, and collapsed on the couch. I was so hungry that I cried and asked her to feed me, but she wouldn't answer. She just fell asleep. At that age, I understood that money could buy food, so I took my wallet and left the house. I went to the store where she worked because I only knew him well. The salesman knew me, too, and he served me politely, gave me food and change, and sent me home. But on the way, I got distracted by the ice cream truck and froze. I remembered that my mother had some money left, so I took it all and gave it to the seller, asking for the largest ice cream. I ate it right away, and then I came home. My mom woke up to the noise, and then she saw me and a bag of food. She asked me how I got it, and then she noticed her wallet in my hand. Before I could even explain, she came up to me and tore out the wallet and found that there was almost no money left. Oh, she was furious. My mother started shouting at me, and I took her money without asking, that I spent it and called me ungrateful and disgusting. And then she said that she hated me. Her words went straight to my heart. I could already feel that she had a motherly feeling for me, but she hadn't said directly before that she hated her son so much. I sank down, lost in myself, because I was rejected. After a few years, the situation has not changed. On the contrary, it's become even worse. My mother lived for herself every year, forgetting about me. Since the age of 2, she had left me alone in the apartment and went to work for somewhere else. Sometimes it happened that she was gone for too long. She was absent for 2 to 3 days. I was scared. I was starving. And she usually left me bread, water, and sausages on the table. On the second day, everything ended. I was very thirsty, but I couldn't reach the tap. One day, I put up some chairs and fell, hitting my head on the floor. I was crying so hard that I thought the whole house could hear. And I was right. Our neighbors heard a noise, and they called the police, and they kicked the door down. They almost arrested my mother, but thanks to the joint efforts of the neighbors, they did not. They managed to persuade a sheriff they knew because if they had taken her away, I would have been left alone. My mother swore to improve, and she took me away and went to another city. A few more years passed, and my mother never improved. She was almost out of the house. I couldn't get her to pay attention to me. And one day she came in drunk. As soon as she saw me, she started scolding me. At that moment, my patience exploded, and I asked her what I had done to make her hate me. What did I do to make her treat me like this? And she stood in front of me with tears in her eyes and replied, "You appeared in my life, and at that moment everything went wrong." That's what she told me. Then she added that she loved my father very much, and that it was at her request that she gave birth to me. But he left because of me. You were such a problem, constantly crying. We didn't sleep, constantly waking up at night, and because of this, he couldn't stand it. He left because of you, she shouted. Words cannot express how much pain I experienced from those words. It seemed to me that the existence of a child ends when the mother ceases to perceive the child and blames him for the life that is not developed. I asked her what I could do for her to stop hating me, and she said, "Give it back to me." And she drank a little more and, as usual, passed out. At this time, I packed up and left the house. I went to look for my father, because it was the only way out. So it seemed to me then. I'll not tell you how I led wandering a lifestyle, how I searched, tried to earn money to feed myself. It was so bad, so painful, that you can't even imagine. I wondered where I had to. All I had was a picture of my father, his first and last name. The passersby didn't help me much. I spent another year on the unsuccessful search. During this time, I did not find a single clue. but I learned to sleep at train stations, save food, and endure hunger for 5 days. It was not sweet, and then one day, for the first time in my life, luck smiled on me. When summer came, I went to look for a job in the summer pool as a cleaner. There was always a lot of work, but they didn't ask too many questions, and I could live there in the back room, where there was a bed, water, and even a TV. I could take a shower and be safe. I worked for them every season, and they knew me very well, so everything was captured. So, one weekend, I decided to swim there. I was allowed to. A man came to us. He jumped wrongly from the side and almost hit his head with all of his strength on the very edge. I was very scared, and then I rushed to help. But I was already out of breath, so I gave him artificial respiration, a heart massage, and he suddenly began to breathe. We were all scared then. When he came to sense, he thanked me, and then, an hour later, he invited me to dinner to thank me. He went to the nearest diner, and I kept looking at his face and couldn't figure out where I could see him. We chatted a lot, and only then did we think of introducing ourselves, and suddenly he said his name, Ethan Bradley. My heart started beating. I took out the photo, and when he saw it, he started coughing. "Where did you get that?" he asked. I said it as it is, and this is a photo of my father. We were silent. For a long time, I knew he was as confused as I was. And then he started asking so many questions. I asked him where he was, why he left us, to which he replied that his parents were cruel people, and they were against their marriage to my mother, and when they found out that he had had a child, they forced him to retreat and destroy him if he didn't leave us. There was so much I wanted to say to him that at the moment, but he already knew and understood everything. He just started crying, and I was in so much pain. If it wasn't for these threats from my grandparents, my life wouldn't have turned into hell. I wouldn't have to had to make a shop on the street with someone, sleep in the cold, starve. I suddenly felt so bad that I almost suffocated. Later, we both left the cafe and I told him my mother's address. On the way, I told him everything, that she hated me because of him, and that she thought it was all my fault. My father was shocked. He was horrified by my story and just sobbed. He asked for forgiveness 100 times, but it was too painful for me. And when we arrived at my mother's house, she opened the door and fainted. And then she attacked my father and me. She began to cry too, begged for forgiveness, saying that she had hated herself for everything that she had done, for hurting her son, for driving him away. You may ask how I felt at that moment. I was hurt, bad and hurt, and I'm not ready to forgive and let go of it all yet. But I am glad that I managed to reunite my parents. It was my mother's dream. My father rented a place for me. He helps with the money, and he gave me a car. My mom is trying her best to win back trust, but I'm not ready to live with them yet. I need time to get used to it. All in all, I'm glad they're doing well. Tell me, did you guys like my story? Write your opinion about it in the comments below in the video. Don't forget to put likes, share the video with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.
Hello everyone, my name is Eliza. I had a difficult period in my life, even the most difficult. Of course, it's a little easier now, but what I went through almost made me give up. I will tell you everything now in more detail. And you please like the video, write your opinion in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel. I'm in high school. I'm 15 years old, and I've never been an ardent party girl. Yes, I was the most ordinary girl who studied, helped my mother with chores around the house. My mother had a second marriage. That is, I lived with my stepfather. They had twins, and my mother had absolutely no time for me. On the one hand, I understood that I was an adult, and I needed to support my mother. It is more difficult for her, but on the other, I still felt the need for her presence in my life. But ever since she got pregnant, there has been less and less of her. The only thing left for me is to move on, go to school, and help around the house. Well, then some kind of nightmare began. When the babies were born, it was great, of course. We were all happy, but most of all, I was worried about my mother. When they were discharged from the hospital, something started at home. There was a round-the-clock yell. It was impossible to sleep or do homework in the house because the girls were constantly yelling. Then one, then another. I had no idea how to help her. And on the other hand, I just wanted silence. Once, when my father left for work, my mother asked me to stay and help her with the little ones. I couldn't because I had an important exam waiting for me at school. I couldn't miss it. All of a sudden, she started yelling at me a lot. She called me a shitty daughter, and I was offended by her. What right did she have to call me that? Out of anger, I said a lot of unnecessary things to her. I probably shouldn't have said it, but I couldn't help myself. I shouted that it wasn't my fault that she had remarried and had to give birth. My mother felt like cold water had been thrown over her. She stood up straight and left. Full of anger, I slammed the door and ran to school. By the way, yes, that day I successfully failed the exam, and this made me even more angry. I've never been so angry before. Anyway, just in time for me to step out into the hallway after the exam, Cal came up to me. This is a guy from another group. He has been hitting on me for a long time, but I did not return his love. He invited me to a party in honor of the fact that his parents went on vacation and left him alone in their big house. I decided to accept the invitation and went with him as agreed. I was very drunk that night, and I think I was taken with a first glass of champagne. I felt so bad that I couldn't control myself anymore. All I remember is Cal pouring me another glass of champagne or wine and then inviting me into his bedroom. I didn't even say anything. I just went with him, and I don't remember much about what happened there. When I woke up the next morning, I felt like my whole body was hurting, including my head. Cal started to say something to me, but I put my hand over his mouth. I didn't want to hear it. I got dressed and left. I heard a lot more from my mother, and our relationship heated up. But the problems didn't end there. After a week, I noticed something. I had delayed menstruation. I bought a pregnancy test, and yes, it's like I've won the fucking jackpot. I got pregnant. All I felt at that moment was regret and confusion. I felt sorry for myself, and also terribly afraid. I now did not know what to do and how to be. I definitely didn't want to tell Cal about it, and I planned not to tell anyone yet. My mother knocked sharply on the bathroom door, and I ran out of it like I was scolded. I ran into my room and remembered that I had left the test in the bathroom. A second later, my mother ran out of there shouting, "Are you pregnant?" I didn't have time to come up with an excuse, so I just said yes. She asked who the father was, and I said I didn't know, or rather I didn't remember. She almost had a heart attack. No, I wasn't hoping for anything, and I hadn't even decided what to do about keeping the baby or not. But my mother's behavior made me give up, and I suddenly wanted to give birth to her for evil. She went and wailed every day, slowly dripping on my nerves. She demanded that I have an abortion. I said I was going to give birth. To be honest, I didn't expect such a reaction, but she collected all my things and put them out the door. I couldn't believe she'd done that. Well, how can you kick out your pregnant daughter? I felt a sense of despair and resentment, and all I wanted to do was cry. I cried a lot and every day. It's a good thing my girlfriend took me in. Natalie was kind, and she lived alone with her parents. Nat understood my situation and promised to help me in any way she could. I don't know how long I lay and cried. Apparently it was influenced by hormones. It's been a week, and I haven't heard from my mother. Of course, this upset me even more. My stepfather didn't care about me. I didn't need anyone but myself and my girlfriend. As soon as I thought about it, someone came to the door. Imagine, it was my stepfather. He brought me money, food, and clothes. It turns out that Natalie told him where I was, and he decided to help a little. I didn't expect it. When I asked where my mom was, he said she was home with the girls, apologized for her, and said she was having a hard time, so she was taking it out on me. I asked him to tell her that I was not a scapegoat, and that if it was so difficult for her to think about me, then let her not strain herself. Apparently, she had no place left for me in her life. My stepfather must have felt it too, so it was like he was apologizing. I accepted his help, and then he left. I gave the whole amount to Natalie for my living expenses. We held out for another month, but I needed care, a doctor and all that, and I didn't even know where to go. I was so scared. I was getting even more depressed when someone knocked on our door again. I thought it was my stepfather again, but Cal was standing outside the door. He threw himself on me, kissed me, hugged me, and swore that he would love our child more than anyone else. I couldn't believe it. I thought he was kidding, but it turns out I was wrong about him. Cal hugged me and asked me why I didn't say anything, why I didn't tell him, and all I said was, "Are you sure the baby's yours?" To which he replied that he did not doubt it for a second, and he was right. Cal talked to his parents, and they took me home with them. He had a great family, they accepted me, and Cal started working for his father and earning money. I took a sabbatical from school to calmly go through the pregnancy and give birth. In general, wish me good luck, because in a couple of months, we will see our baby.